There's a story most of us think we know. King Arthur, the sword in the stone, the Knights of the Round Table, the quest for the Holy Grail. It's a foundational myth, a story of nobility, of a brief, shining moment of justice and order in a dark world. We see a king who is wise, just, and almost impossibly good. This is the surface layer, the one polished by centuries of retelling, the one we are handed in school books and Disney films. But if you press down on that smooth surface, you find a crack, a deep, unsettling inconsistency that runs right through the heart of Camelot. And that crack has a name: Mordred. Mordred is the traitor. He is the serpent in the garden, the man who brings it all crashing down. In the final battle of Camelot, he and Arthur give each other their death wounds. The Golden Age ends in blood and betrayal. But who is he? Why does he have a claim to the throne? Why does his betrayal feel so personal, so deeply woven into the fabric of Arthur's own life? Most modern versions we encounter are strangely quiet on this point. He's sometimes called a nephew, sometimes just a rebellious knight. The reason for his profound antagonism is left vague, a simple power grab. This vagueness, this deliberate silence, is our way in. It's the loose thread that, when we pull on it, begins to unravel the entire tapestry. It's the reason we have to start digging. There's a persistent, dark whisper that accompanies the legend, a piece of information that floats around the edges of the story, often phrased in a shocking, simple way. King Arthur had a child with his own sister. Sometimes it's even distorted into the idea that he married her. This is the anomaly we're going to investigate. This isn't a simple fact to be confirmed or denied. It's an artifact. And like any artifact, it has layers. It has been buried, reshaped, polished, and reinterpreted by every generation that has touched it. Our job is not to simply state a truth, but to excavate these layers together. We're going to treat the story of Arthur and his sister as an archaeological site. We'll start at the surface, this modern, sanitized version, and carefully remove each layer of soil, each stratum of history, to see what we find underneath. What we're looking for is not just what happened in the story, but why the story itself keeps changing. Let's begin the dig. The first layer we need to remove is the most recent. This is the layer of the late 19th and 20th centuries. It's a thick, heavy layer, compacted by industrial-era morality and the needs of a modern nation-state. Let's look at Alfred, Lord Tennyson. His collection of poems, Idylls of the King, published between 1859 and 1885, became the definitive version of Arthur for the Victorian era, and its influence is almost impossible to overstate. It shaped how generations of English-speaking people understood the legend. And in Tennyson's Camelot, there is no room for incest. Tennyson is writing for a world, for an empire, that needs a national hero. Arthur cannot be a man with a dark, terrible secret at the heart of his kingdom. He must be a symbol of Christian virtue, of order against chaos, of the idealized English gentleman. So, what does Tennyson do with Mordred? He keeps him as the villain, the traitor. But his origin is deliberately obscured. He is the son of Arthur's sister, Queen Lot's wife. But Arthur is not the father. In Tennyson's telling, the sin that destroys Camelot is not a foundational, incestuous secret in Arthur's bloodline. Instead, it's the adulterous love between Lancelot and Guinevere. The sin is externalized, shifted onto the queen and the best friend. It becomes a failure of courtly love, a sensual sin rather than a primordial, almost biblical one. We are watching a deliberate act of cultural curation. Tennyson is cleaning up the myth. He's scrubbing away the moral ambiguity. Look at the language he uses. His Arthur is the blameless king. A blameless king cannot have a child with his sister. It's a logical impossibility within the moral framework Tennyson is building. So, the story is altered. The evidence is right there in the text. The incest is simply gone. It has been written out of the record, and because Tennyson was so hugely popular, his version becomes the new surface layer for decades to come. This process of sanitation continues into the 20th century. Think of T.H. White's masterful The Once and Future King. It's a much more psychologically complex work than Tennyson's, filled with warmth and humanity. But even White, writing from the 1930s to the 1950s, handles the incest with extreme caution. He doesn't erase it, but he reframes it significantly. In his version, it's the work of a manipulative sorceress, Arthur's half-sister Morgause, who seduces the young, naive Arthur through magic. It is not a mutual act, nor a simple mistake. It is a magical assault. Arthur is a victim. This shifts the blame almost entirely onto the woman, turning her into a predatory figure and preserving Arthur's fundamental innocence. He is tricked, he is enchanted, he is not in his heart a sinner. The story is preserved, but the moral weight is completely redistributed. And then, of course, we have the most popular version of all for many people, Disney's The Sword in the Stone from 1963, which is based on the first part of White's book. Here, the sanitization is absolute. We are left with only the charming story of a young boy learning from a bumbling wizard. There is no hint of the darkness to come, no foreshadowing of Mordred, no mention of sisters or seduction. The excavation of this top layer is complete, and the finding is clear. The modern story of King Arthur is the product of a deliberate and sustained effort to erase a central, disturbing element of the myth. The question is, what were they so desperate to cover up? To find that, we have to dig deeper. We are now breaking through the soil of the modern era. We're going down, past the Victorians, past the Enlightenment, back to the late Middle Ages. We're looking for the source that Tennyson and White were both working from, the bedrock of the English Arthurian tradition. And we find it. It's a book compiled in a prison cell around the year 1470 by a knight named Sir Thomas Malory. It's called Le Mort d'Arthur, The Death of Arthur. And here, the story is very, very different. Malory is not writing for a polite Victorian audience. He's writing at the bloody, chaotic end of the Wars of the Roses, a decades-long civil war that tore England apart. He has seen kingdoms rise and fall. He has seen noble houses destroy themselves from within. He is not interested in a blameless king. He is interested in how great things fall apart. And for Malory, the fall of Camelot begins with a single, catastrophic act. Here, in the pages of Malory, there is no ambiguity. There is no magical trickery. No coyness. The incest is stated as a fact. Let's examine the evidence directly. Malory tells us that early in his reign, long before Camelot is established in its glory, a queen comes to Arthur's court. Her name is Morgause. She is the wife of King Lot of Orkney, and she has come as a messenger. Malory then adds a crucial piece of information, almost as an aside. He tells us that Morgause is Arthur's sister, the daughter of his mother, Igraine, and her first husband, the Duke of Cornwall. Arthur, at this point, does not know this. He was raised in secret by Sir Ector and is unaware of his full parentage. And then Malory writes this passage. Let's look at the language he uses. So the king made great cheer unto her and to her knights, and gave them great gifts, and he desired to lie by her. It's direct, it's shockingly simple. There's no magic, no deception on her part. He sees her, he desires her, and because he is the king, he has his way. Malory continues, so she was his sister on the mother side, Igraine. So there she rested her a month, and at the last departed. And the king wist not that she was his sister. He didn't know. That is the crucial detail for Malory. It is a sin. But it is a sin committed in ignorance. It is a tragic mistake, a flaw of fate, not of character. From this one night, a child is conceived. That child is Mordred. And in Malory's telling, this act is the source of all the sorrow to come. It is the original sin of the kingdom of Logres. Merlin the wizard later reveals the truth to Arthur, who is horrified. Then the king was sorry and heavy of heart, Malory writes. Merlin prophesies that the child born of this union will be the destruction of Arthur and his kingdom. The doom of Camelot is not caused by an external enemy or a simple love affair. It is born from the king himself. It is his own blood. Notice the difference between this and the layers above it. Tennyson removes the sin. T.H. White makes it the fault of a sorceress, but Malory places it right at the feet of his hero, albeit a hero who acts in ignorance. For Malory, this is not a story about a perfect man, it is a tragedy in the classical sense. It's the story of a great man with a fatal flaw, a hidden sin in his past that will one day rise up to destroy him. Mordred is not just a traitor, he is Arthur's fate. He is the physical embodiment of a sin that cannot be washed away. Every time Arthur looks at Mordred, he is looking at his own past, his own mistake. This is so much more psychologically powerful and devastating than the versions that came after. It's also important to note who Malory says the sister is. It's Morgause, wife of Lot. In his version, there is another half-sister, Morgan le Fay, who is a powerful enchantress and a frequent antagonist to Arthur. In later versions, these two figures, Morgause and Morgan, often get conflated into a single character, Morgan le Fay, who then becomes both the sorceress enemy and the mother of Mordred. This conflation makes the act seem even more malicious, a deliberate plot by Arthur's greatest enemy. But in Malory, our primary source for the English tradition, they are distinct. The act that dooms Camelot is a moment of simple, unknowing lust, not a complex, magical conspiracy. We have now excavated Malory's lair. We have found the incest plot, raw and central to the tragedy. But our dig is not complete. The question now becomes, where did Malory get this story? Was this the original state of the legend? Or is there another, even deeper layer beneath him? We have to keep digging. We are now tunneling deeper into the past, beneath Malory's 15th century bedrock. Malory wasn't inventing this from whole cloth. He was compiling and translating from a vast body of earlier works, most of them written not in English, but in French. We are entering the world of the great 13th century French prose cycles, the Vulgate cycle and the post-Vulgate cycle. These are enormous, sprawling collections of stories that attempted to create a single, unified history of the Grail and of Arthur's kingdom, and it is here, in these French romances, that the incest theme truly blossoms. The French romance writers of the High Middle Ages are obsessed with chivalry, with courtly love, and with sin. They are writing for a sophisticated, aristocratic audience that loves complex genealogies, hidden identities, and tragic, intertwined fates. For them, a simple political rivalry between an uncle and a nephew isn't enough. It lacks grandeur, it lacks theological weight, so they take the existing characters and weave a much darker, more intricate web around them. It is in these French cycles that the story of Arthur and his sister is fully developed as the central, driving tragedy of the entire saga. They are the ones who codify the idea that Mordred is the product of an unwitting incestuous union. Why? What are they trying to achieve by adding this element? We are now analysing the motives of the revisers. They are transforming the story from a political history into a spiritual allegory. The affair between Lancelot and Guinevere is one major sin that stains the court, but the incest of the king is the foundational sin, the one from which all other destructions flow. It mirrors the idea of an original sin in the Garden of Eden. Camelot is a paradise, but it is a flawed paradise, built on a secret transgression. This edition serves a powerful narrative purpose. It creates an inescapable destiny for Arthur. He can be the greatest king on earth, he can gather the best knights, he can create the most just kingdom, but he can never outrun the consequences of that one night. Mordred's existence is a constant ticking clock, counting down to the doom of everything Arthur has built. This elevates the story. It's no longer just about battles and tournaments. It's about fate, predestination, and the impossibility of escaping one's own past. The French writers are injecting a potent dose of Augustinian theology and Greek tragedy into a British folk legend. So we've found the source of Malory's story. It's not English in origin, it's a French literary invention from the 13th century. We have dug through the modern sanitization, through Malory's tragic realism, and found this layer of high medieval romance. We are getting closer. But is this bedrock? Is this the original story? The answer, incredibly, is no. There is one more layer to excavate. We must go back before the French romancers, before the year 1200, to the very first book that tells the full story of King Arthur's life. And what we find there will change everything. We are now at the lowest stratum of our dig. We are in the 12th century. The year is approximately 1136. A Welsh cleric at Oxford named Geoffrey of Monmouth completes a book that will change the course of European literature. It's called Historia Regum Britannia, or The History of the Kings of Britain. This book is the first to present a complete, connected narrative of Arthur's life, from his birth to his death. It is, for all intents and purposes, the foundational text of the Arthurian legend as we know it. All the writers we've looked at, the French romancers, Malory, Tennyson, are all, directly or indirectly, responding to Geoffrey of Monmouth. This is as close to bedrock as we can get for the narrative. So we hold our breath and we examine the text. We look for the story of Arthur and his sister. We look for the birth of Mordred, and we find nothing. It is not there. Let me be absolutely clear about this. In the very first full account of King Arthur's life, the foundational text of the entire legend, there is no incest. According to Geoffrey of Monmouth, Arthur has a sister named Anna. She is married to Loth, the king of Orkney. Together, they have two sons, Gawain and Modredus. That's Mordred. In the original, foundational version of the story, Mordred is simply Arthur's nephew. He is the legitimate son of Arthur's sister and her husband, King Lot. The final battle of Camelot is still the climax of the story. While Arthur is away campaigning in Europe, his nephew, Modredus, whom he had left in charge of Britain, seizes the throne and marries Queen Guinevere. Arthur returns and they fight a catastrophic war that destroys the fellowship of Britain. Let this sink in. The betrayal is still there. The destruction is still there. But the reason for it is entirely different. It's a political usurpation. It's a nephew betraying his uncle's trust. It is a story of ambition and political instability, not a story of a fated, supernatural doom brought on by a hidden sin. The conflict is purely human, purely political. There is no prophecy. There is no child of incest. There is no original sin that has doomed Camelot from the start. This is a stunning discovery. It means that the central, most disturbing element of the King Arthur story, the very thing that gives Malory's version its tragic power, is a later invention. It was added to the story more than 100 years after Geoffrey of Monmouth first wrote it down. We have reached the bottom of our excavation, and we have found that the artifact we were looking for, the story of Arthur and his sister, is not part of the original structure at all. It was built on top of the foundation at a later date. We can even dig a little bit past Geoffrey into the shifting soil of the original Welsh legends from which he was drawing. In the Welsh triads, in the Mabinogion, we find a figure named Bedrock. This is the Welsh original of Mordred, and in these early tales, his relationship to Arthur is often that of a nephew, but the stories are fragmentary. What is crucial is that in none of these earliest Welsh sources is there any mention of an incestuous birth. The story simply doesn't exist. Bedrock is a warrior, sometimes a rival to Arthur, but he is not his son. The narrative of incest is completely absent from the British Welsh bedrock of the myth. So now our excavation is complete. We can stand back and look at the cross-section of the earth we've removed. At the surface, we have the modern, sanitized Arthur, a blameless king with a vaguely motivated traitor. Below that, the Victorian layer, where the sin is shifted to Lancelot and Guinevere. Deeper still, we find Malory's tragic king, haunted by a sin committed in ignorance. Below that, the French romances, where the incest is a central theological and narrative device, a story of inescapable fate. And finally, at the bedrock, in Geoffrey of Monmouth and the Welsh sources, we find a political story of a king betrayed by his ambitious nephew. The story of Arthur and his sister is not the true story of King Arthur. It is the story of a dramatic, powerful, and world-changing act of revision. Now, we move from excavation to analysis. We have all the pieces laid out before us. We have the different strata, the different versions of the story. The question is no longer what happened, but why? Why did the French romancers in the 13th century feel the need to invent the incest plot? What did it achieve? This is where we begin to understand the incredible power of storytelling to shape meaning. Let's analyse the motives. The world of Geoffrey of Monmouth in the 1130s is a world interested in legitimacy, in succession, in the founding of nations. His history is presented as just that, a history. A story of a nephew usurping a throne is a recognisable political narrative. It's about the breakdown of feudal loyalty. It's a cautionary tale for kings and barons. But by the 1230s, the literary culture has changed. The audience in the courts of France and Burgundy is not just interested in political history. They are steeped in a culture of chivalric romance, poetry, and complex Christian allegory. They want stories with deeper, more spiritual meanings. Adding the incest plot does three critical things. First, it internalises the conflict. The downfall of Camelot is no longer just the result of one man's bad ambition. It becomes an expression of a flaw within the king himself. The enemy is not just at the gates. The enemy is in the king's own blood. This is a far more profound and psychologically resonant story. It transforms Arthur from a great general into a great tragic figure. He is now Oedipus. He is a man fighting against a fate that he himself unknowingly set in motion. Second, it provides a powerful explanation for the fall of this perfect kingdom. Why would a society as ideal as Camelot collapse? A simple political betrayal feels inadequate. It doesn't seem big enough to destroy a legend, but a foundational sin, a curse born of forbidden love. That has the kind of mythic weight needed to explain such a catastrophic failure. It suggests that Camelot was doomed from the moment of its conception, that its beauty was always a mask hiding a dark secret. This resonates with a medieval Christian worldview where human institutions are always flawed and subject to sin. Third, and perhaps most importantly, it radically changes the character of Mordred. In Geoffrey's version, he is a straightforward villain. He's ambitious, treacherous, and disloyal. We can hate him without complication. But once he becomes Arthur's son, he is transformed into something much more complex. He is a tragic figure in his own right. He is the living proof of a sin that everyone wants to forget. He is unloved, a product of a union that should never have happened. His rebellion is no longer just a grab for power. It becomes a primal, almost understandable act of rebellion against the father who represents the shameful secret of his own birth. He is both the villain and the victim of the story. This adds a layer of moral ambiguity that the French audiences craved. We are also witnessing the evolution of the female characters. In Geoffrey, Arthur's sister Anna is just a name in a genealogy, but once the incest plot is introduced, her later incarnations, Morgause and Morgan Le Fay, become central players. They are the vessels for this dangerous, world-breaking sexuality, as we saw with T.H. White. The tendency over time is to load more and more of the blame onto them. They become the seductive enchantresses, the schemers, while Arthur's own agency in the act is diminished. We are watching the anxieties of different eras about female power and sexuality being written directly into the myth. So, the invention of the incest plot was a stroke of narrative genius. It took a British political chronicle and supercharged it with the thematic power of Greek tragedy and Christian theology. It created the version of the story that would have the most staying power, the one Malory would draw on, the one that would become the dark, secret heart of the legend. But the final irony, of course, is what happened next. This powerful invention was so disturbing, so morally problematic, that the Victorians and modern storytellers felt compelled to bury it all over again. They dug a hole and pushed the incest plot back into it, creating the sanitized surface layer we started with. The story is a cycle of revelation and concealment, of invention and erasure. What are the broader implications of this excavation? What does this journey from the surface to the bedrock tell us about how we remember and how we forget? This isn't just a story about a fictional king. It's a case study in the life cycle of a cultural narrative. It shows us that stories are not static things, set in stone. They are living organisms. They adapt, they mutate, they evolve to meet the needs of the culture that is telling them. We've uncovered a clear pattern. A story begins with a certain form, in this case, a political history of a warrior king. As it is passed on, it accrues new layers of meaning. The French romances add a layer of tragic destiny and Christian sin, because those were the themes that resonated with their world. Sir Thomas Malory, living through a brutal civil war, keeps that tragic layer because it speaks to his own experience of a kingdom destroying itself from within. Then, in a later period with vastly different moral anxieties, like Victorian England, those very same layers are seen as dangerous, as corrupting, and so a new process begins. The process of stripping away, of sanitizing, of burying the uncomfortable truths of the past to create a hero suitable for the present. This process is not neutral. It is deeply ideological. Each revision, each addition or subtraction serves a purpose. The addition of the incest plot served the theological and literary tastes of the French aristocracy. The removal of it served the moral and imperial project of the Victorians. We are watching, in the strata of this one story, the shifting anxieties of Western culture over 1,000 years, anxieties about political legitimacy, about sin and fate, about female sexuality, and about the nature of heroism. And this pattern is not confined to the distant past. It's happening right now. We are constantly retelling and revising our foundational stories to better fit our contemporary values. Think of how historical figures are presented in film, or how national foundation myths are taught in schools. There is always a tension between the complex, messy reality of the historical record, our bedrock, and the clean, inspiring narrative that we want to believe, our surface layer. The story of King Arthur teaches us to be archaeologists of our own culture. It encourages us to ask, whenever we are presented with a simple, clear-cut story, what is this version trying to do? What is it highlighting? And most importantly, what might it be leaving out? What has been deliberately buried? The original user prompt, the question that started our dig, was about the disturbing true story of Arthur marrying his sister. We've found that the truth is much stranger. He didn't marry her. The incest itself was a later invention, and that invention was so powerful it became the secret heart of the story, only to be covered up again. The most disturbing and the most true thing is not any single event within the story. It's the story of the story itself. It's the realization that our most cherished myths are palimpsests, documents that have been written on, scraped clean, and written on again, with the faint traces of the old text still visible underneath, if you know how to look. So, our excavation is complete. We have returned to the surface. We stand again in the present, looking at the familiar landscape of the Arthurian legend, but it no longer looks the same. We can no longer see it as a single, unified story. Instead, we see the lumps and depressions in the ground that hint at the complex structures buried beneath. We started with a simple question about a disturbing detail, and we have ended with a new framework for understanding how culture works. We have seen that the noble, blameless king of the popular imagination is a relatively recent renovation, a facade built over a much more complicated and tragic structure. We discovered the master blueprint for that tragic structure in the French romances, who, for their own reasons, added a foundation of sin and fate, and beneath it all we found the original bedrock in Geoffrey of Monmouth and the Welsh traditions, a story not of sin, but of politics, not of fate, but of human ambition. The revisions, the centuries of editing, tried to bury the different parts of this story. The Victorians tried to bury the incest. The French romancers tried to bury the simpler political narrative. But you can never completely erase what came before. The echoes remain. The inconsistencies, like the vagueness around Mordred's origin in modern tales, are the artifacts that point to the deeper layers. They are the clues that tell us there is more to the story. So, when you encounter the story of King Arthur now, you are no longer just a passive listener. You are an archaeologist. You can see the layers. You can see the polished surface of the modern retelling, but you can also see, shimmering beneath it, the tragic contours of Malory's tale, the theological architecture of the French cycles, and the hard, political bedrock of Geoffrey of Monmouth. They are all there, simultaneously. Each layer tells a different truth, not about a mythical past, but about the very real anxieties and aspirations of the people who told it. The true story of King Arthur is not a single narrative, it is the excavation itself. It is the discovery that our myths are not monuments, but living, breathing, ever-changing landscapes, shaped and reshaped by the endless human need to tell ourselves stories about who we are.